Support for the Iranian people continues in a number of countries around the world, including right here in Canada and south of the border of the United States. Many are angry at the Islamic Republic regime and their alleged human rights abuses. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, not far from you in Beverly Hills, a number of Iranian Americans rallied recently showing solidarity with Iranians who are protesting the Islamic Republic and its brutal crackdowns. Many are still angry following the death of a young 22-year-old Iranian woman who allegedly died at the hands of the Islamic morality police after facing arrest for wearing her hijab incorrectly.
Right. So we're entering the 8th week of protests. So 2 months of protests following the death of Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old woman you speak of, Hal, who was showing a bit of her hair in front of her headscarf, was taken in by the morality police and died, lost her life. And since then, there have been hundreds who have lost their lives in the protests on the streets in Iran, and thousands detained. They're actually calling for the death penalty for the peaceful protesters who have been rounded up. That would be thousands of innocent lives lost just for coming out, just for speaking out and demanding their freedom. And on the streets of Beverly Hills and Vancouver and New York and Berlin and in other places around the world, there have been solidarity protests where thousands of Iranians living outside the country and many others who support them have come out in solidarity to show their support for the Iranian protesters on the ground and to say that women's lives matter, everybody's life matters, they deserve their freedom, and that the regime must go.
Will this make much of a difference? I mean, it's good to show that kind of solidarity, you know, how we're standing in support of so many people, persecuted people in Iran, but will the regime even take notice?
You know, it's a great question you ask, and actually in Canada, where you are, the pressure, the raising of awareness has caused the government to do a bit of a pivot and to call out the regime and to forbid the Revolutionary Guard's family members from traveling to Canada to live there, to derive the benefits of living outside the country. The United States has done the same, has actually gone further to put the Revolutionary Guard on the national terror list. These are movements or actions that bring awareness, whether it's for the media or for the government, to take action to at least diminish the influence of the Iranian regime abroad. And I think these protests do a lot, not just in showing solidarity, which is very important, I don't want to diminish that, but it also brings a lot of attention to local and national governing bodies to take decisive action and legislation against the Islamic regime in Iran, to put sanctions on the regime, to step away from the Iran nuclear deal, which is what we've been asking the US and its European allies to do for years now. These are all actions that will help cripple the regime, will help the people's movement go forward. And of course, as I said, the showing of solidarity with all those people who are risking their lives just to come out to tell us their stories, it's invaluable.
The Revolutionary Guard in Iran flexed their military muscles recently by launching a new satellite-carrying rocket, Lisa. Officials say it was to demonstrate the hardline forces' prowess, even as the anti-government protests continue unabated across the country.
Right. And in the midst of all of this, you can call it a distraction, or you can call it flexing of muscles to show that, we're still here. These protests don't mean anything to us, and they're not, we're not in a precarious place, or they're not jeopardizing our rule or reign on the country. So this is obviously by design. The Islamic Republic has always done this. They do this public display to say, we're still in charge. We're still in power. We are even going to focus on our, outside our borders and our growth of our weapons program, or launching missiles, or threatening different countries, or supporting the Houthis in Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're still here. We're still in power. This is a page from the handbook. So this is why it's so important to really focus on the protest, to give it the headlines they deserve, give them the attention they deserve, and to continue putting the story in the spotlight that it truly deserves internationally.
There's word now that Iran is seeking Russia's help to bolster its nuclear program. That's according to recent intel received by U.S. intelligence officials. Tell me more.
Yeah, well, we've known that these two have been in cahoots for a long time. The previous report being that Iran had provided Russia with the drones that it is currently using in Ukraine, and that recently became confirmed. And now, of course, we're seeing that the Iranian regime is calling on Russia tit for tat. Now you owe us. Help us take our weapons program forward. When we do isolate countries like North Korea, like Iran's regime, like Russia, like China, what we also end up doing is pushing them closer to each other, because then the rogue nations of the world must find other rogue nations of the world to partner up with, to become allied with, to trade with, to buy weapons from, etc. So we know that the short list of countries that the Iran regime is working with are Russia and China, and that triangle continues. They depend on each other for different favors. For each one has its own strengths and weaknesses, and they will definitely lean on one another, which is why it's so important to break up this trifecta. It's important to call it out. It's important to stop it where we can in terms of sanctions, and to not allow this trade to happen. We know that they have a 25-year deal, the Iranians and the Chinese, for trade, for oil purchasing. Again, these are the unintended consequences of putting sanctions and isolating these rogue nations.
Let's circle back to the drones for just a moment here, Lisa. Iran's foreign ministry acknowledged that for the first time that Iran has in fact supplied Russia with these attack drones. The drones are being used on the Ukrainian people during the war. Now, apparently these Iranian-made drones have been dive bombing the capital of Kyiv.
Yes, and it's important to unpack this a bit here. First, the Iran regime was denying that they were supplying the Russians with these drones. Zelensky of Ukraine said, "We've actually found them. We have evidence that these are, in fact, Iran regime drones." And finally, they came around to it. I don't know if the world was waiting to hear confirmation or not, that the Iran regime actually acknowledged that, yes, they were supplying the drones to Russia. But again, this relationship of buying weapons and buying goods from one another obviously makes sense. And now we have the confirmation from Iran's regime. And unfortunately, they are being bombarded into Ukraine unmanned. We know that the Russians have had a tremendous number of casualties that they did not count on having, so much so that they are drafting and having Russians flee at rapid speed from Russia in order not to get drafted into this senseless war. But here are all the different points that we must connect in order to understand this invasion of Ukraine and how these rogue nations are playing into it as well.
So, Lisa, what is the latest in the war between Ukraine and Russia? Have any peace talks been discussed between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin since we last spoke? I mean, the war, is it now in its 9th month?
Yes, no, it's absolutely mind-boggling, the amount of, or the number of lives that have been lost, the number of refugees this has created, the amount of physical damage and loss in Ukraine, the number of Russian casualties that we have seen, and for what? It's unbelievable. And up to now, we have not seen any public, announcements of any peace talks. But last night, a report broke by John Solomon of Just the News, saying that there are intelligence reports from the United States that they are trying to pressure Ukraine's Zelensky to reportedly at least make it look like they are working towards peace talks. They want this to come around, perhaps because we're about to have elections here this week, or who knows why, but they want again, this is a report, so we don't have any true confirmation on this from either side, but the report says that U.S. intel says that they want the Ukrainians to at least look like, or at least come towards the idea of having peace talks. Look, it's not a bad idea, right? How obviously that's where we want to go. That's where we want to see this come to an end. Whether it's going to be Russia's call with Putin having his own off ramp and his own idea of when this will end, or world powers, instead of putting billions more dollars and weapons into this awful mess, perhaps coming around and saying, we demand peace talks, and we demand that both sides sit down to talks. Regardless, we obviously want to see this come to an end sooner rather than later. 9 months, senseless, and very, very tragic.
You touched on the elections a little bit south of the border where you are right now. What's the latest in the battle between the Republicans versus the Democrats?
Well, it looks like the Republicans are going to have some significant victories that will tip the at least House of Representatives, maybe the Senate by a seat or two. But look, some people are very, very happy and some are not. But the word here is to get out and vote. And according to many polls that we have looked at here at the Foreign Desk, it looks like crime and inflation are the two most important issues that people in the United States are voting on. As you know, here we have a major issue with both. I think that's across the board and in many countries in the post-pandemic world that we live in. But more in larger cities here in the United States, we have a very, very serious crime issue, as we do here in Los Angeles. In the very nice parts of town, we have crime problems that we never had before. And of course, inflation is affecting every American and Canadian family in terms of buying, food items for the holidays and heating our homes as winter approaches. I know you have snow there in Canada already. So these are important issues. And again, as we all know, when these important issues hit home, that's when people start voting in a way that really will hopefully influence their lives and change it for the better.
More rockets were fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip, Lisa. Fortunately, the Iron Dome aerial defense system intercepted at least one of the rockets launched from Hamas-ruled Gaza, which exploded in midair.
Yeah, well, thank God for the Iron Dome, and thank God for the technologies that protect innocent people in the Middle East and in Israel, of course, against these missiles. But I've been drawing this line a lot in the past 2 months with the Iran protests going on. If you care about Israel's safety, if you care about innocent people dying from terror attacks, whether it's in Lebanon or Israel or Yemen, this is why it's important to focus on the Iran protests. Iran's regime is the #1 state sponsor of terror. They're pouring money into Gaza and into Hamas's pockets, into Hezbollah and the Houthis' pockets, into Palestinian Islamic Jihad and more. They are the #1 sponsor of suicide bombers in the world. And of course, they are terrorizing their own people on the ground in Iran. So draw all the lines back to Tehran, where the regime is, and of course, support this movement, which is a no-brainer. There's no two sides of this story. There's only one side, and it's getting rid of evil on our planet to stop these terror attacks and to stop the flow of money to terror organizations like in Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Britain's national broadcaster, the BBC, has apologized for its disdainful treatment of Jewish concerns or unacceptable handling of complaints about anti-Israel bias in its Arabic output. Can you explain?
This is crazy. This is one of those "are pigs flying" moments. The BBC and its not so positive spin on Israel news or Jewish affairs. It's a known thing. It's almost like it's part of its DNA at this point, and everybody knows and accepts that. And I don't know if "accept" is the right word, but everyone has just associated the BBC with that bias. And for them to come out and say we apologize or we walk it back is a tremendous step. I think this is more in light of what has been going on with anti-Semitism taking such an awful, increasing so much globally now among celebrities and basketball players. And it's horrific. It's horrific to see this happen to the oldest religion on earth, and to see, so many people affected, yet so much silence. We had so much support for the Black Lives Matter movement. We had so much support for every ism or bigotry, as we should. And of course, anti-Semitism should be on that list as well. And for the BBC to come out, it's a tremendous step. But now the question remains, will they in fact change their line of reporting and their biases in the future to truly reflect upon this apology? So let's see. Time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell, absolutely. Our foreign affairs expert and the head of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.